Welcome to episode number 143 of the People We Love podcast. I am Adam Choit. If you're new here, what I do is interview people from all walks of life, most often comedians, other artists, entertainment types, creative types about their lives and careers. It's casual conversation, but I also ask everyone to highlight the people they love, who've inspired them, who've helped them, who've influenced them, who've supported them. For more, check out peoplewelovepodcast.com. That forwards to my link tree and has all the ways to subscribe, to listen, the social media links, all that stuff. It's at People We Love Podcast on Instagram as well. And I'm at Adam Choit on Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me. AdamChoit.com for all my personal stuff, other projects, and things that I'm working on beyond this podcast. But for today's episode, we have Mount Lebanon, PA's own podcast host and much more, John Odermatt. Growing up right outside of Pittsburgh, he tells me all about his home run derby football playing childhood and how high school led to Penn State, to the West Coast, and eventually back to the Pittsburgh area where he met his wife. A land investor, a health wellness entrepreneur, a podcasting meme analyst, and a lot more than that. This was just a fun conversation where tons is covered. So let's just get started with Lions of Liberty's Finding Freedom Zone, John Odermatt. Okay, so it's good to see you today, John Odermatt. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to a unique podcast for me. Normally, I'm talking politics and crazy stuff, so
that's
interested to talk about life, you know?
Yeah, that's what I feel like. I feel like some of the things that I talk about do come up on other podcasts, but other podcasts do tend to be more either just current events, politics, or shooting the shit, or about some specific topic, which would be current events, like sports is just a sub genre or whatever of like the news and whatever. Yeah, so this will be fun. How are you holding up during whatever year this is?
Whatever year this is, 2023.
Yeah.
It's been a good year, man. It's been an adjustment getting back to, traveling again and seeing people. It's kind of weird to say it's an adjustment, but you kind of get used to not traveling as much and not going to, it's like, conferences for work, or I work remotely. The company I work for is out in Oregon, having to travel out there for work and stuff. I kind of got used to, not having to do any of that, but there's good with it. Of course, I like being around people. I like, having my interactions being more than just, yelling at people on Twitter, but it's been a good year. Enjoying it.
You need a balance between traveling and in-person stuff and yelling at people on Twitter. I think those really can balance each other out, because you can get out your frustrations in both places. Take your frustrations out on the people you're mad on the internet with the people in person, and take out your frustrations with this is probably not a healthy way to go about it, actually, thinking it through.
Someone's probably going to create a course for how to balance your life out by yelling at people on Twitter and also enjoying people in real life. Or maybe Tom Woods will write an ebook about it if we're lucky.
Yeah, it's common. Why don't we get into it in your life and your background, and even just get into some early family, where you're from, and earliest memories. I even asked people for to touch on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, the weird thing about me is or maybe this is common, I don't really know. But I don't remember my childhood that well. I remember it's hard. It's always hard to tell for me if you remember what people tell you, or if you remember in a picture you saw. You know what I mean?
I talk about this. I talk about that all the time. How people say, I remember something that happened to me when I was 4. I'm like, nah, man, you saw pictures of what happened when you were 4, when you were 8.
Yeah, no, it's weird. Well, but my wife, though, I feel like certain people do have really specific memories. Like my wife, she can remember stuff, and even the smell associated with it at that time, which is really weird. I can't remember what something smelled like the next day when I try to think back to it. But I mean, just growing up, grew up outside of Pittsburgh, just south of Pittsburgh in the suburbs. And we used to call it the bubble, just because it was, an area where we didn't travel around to lots of different parts of Pittsburgh. People kind of stayed in their area, especially, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. This was pre AOL Instant Messenger, pre Facebook. So even if you have people where today, like I feel like kids today meet people in like neighboring town, and they date people who go to the next high school or whatever. I feel like it's more common for my experience growing up and going to high school and all that. I was more contained in like within the Mount Lebanon bubble, as we called it back then. But pretty good childhood. I mean, to great childhood. I mean, nothing really to complain about. I count myself to be very lucky. My parents are still married today. They still live in the same house that I grew up in. Have a brother and sister. My brother's 6 years older than me. My sister is 3.5 years older. And my sister and I, being closer in age, obviously we're closer growing up. My brother went away to college when I was 12 years old. But yeah, man, I mean, have good memories of looking back on childhood. You ask about a specific memory. When you talk about specific memories, this isn't a memory. This is a video that I remember seeing that my sister always gives me a hard time about, because she always says that I was spoiled being the youngest in the family. And there's this video of me eating cherry pie at the kitchen table. My parents still have the same kitchen table. And my parents say, "No, look at the little guy eating his cherry pie." I'm like, 5 or 6 years old. And my sister will still bring that up. And she's so angry about it, how, the youngest always gets all the attention.
That's funny. What were you into when you were like in elementary school? Or you were into like sports or music, or what kind of kid were you like around in elementary school age?
Yeah, man, I think pretty common for that time was, kids did a lot of stuff outdoors. I feel like it's changed a little bit today, but I had a neighbor that lived right behind me, Vince Manzo, who was a year older, and probably from the age of, I don't know, 6 to 10 or 12, we would just play wiffle ball all day in my backyard. We had like a perfect setup where we had like a line of hedges that was, I don't know, like the backyard's probably 60 feet or so. So it was perfect for like home run derby. So we would just pitch to each other and play home run derby for hours and hours. And that's probably how I got into loving baseball so much. Was a big Pirates fan growing up back when the Pirates were good. Well, they had a little spell in 2015, 2013, 2015, but back in the 90s, that was Barry Bonds, Andy Van Slyke, Bobby Bonilla on the Pirates. That was prime time for me. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, when I talk to other people that are around the same age as us, we kind of all have the similar memories, where your parents kind of just let you go, man. Like in the summer, you would go out the door, you go to a friend's house. Maybe you'll come back for lunch. Maybe you'll bring some friends back for lunch. And yeah, it was just it was a sort of a free lifestyle. I feel like we had more liberty back then as kids. And even with, my daughter today, I feel like I'm a little bit more of a helicopter with her, which I try not to be, but it's hard not to. But
yeah, it's interesting to hear all that. Yeah, and I can relate to so much of what you're saying, just in terms of the upbringing. And I guess I forget that because I don't have kids, but how we were more free in a lot of ways in the lifestyle. And I never even considered myself an outdoorsy kid or an outdoorsy person. I'm not even like a big nature outdoorsy hiking, camping person to this state. But a lot of my childhood, most of it, after, if not in a classroom, was spent outdoors doing similar things, home run derby, or just in the woods somewhere. I don't know. Like,
yeah, it was just like, we had a McDonald's we had to walk. It was probably about a mile from our house, but we would get a bunch of neighborhood kids, and like today, kids doing this, someone might call the cops. I don't know, but there was like this pretty steep, like it was I guess technically a hill, but it was more like a cliff. Like it was pretty straight down. And we would rappel down this cliff by grabbing on roots, would have like $5 in our sock to get something at McDonald's and, cut through people's backyards to get there, to get to that cliff, but go in and eat and climb back up and walk home. But that was just normal. And I didn't even think about like, should I tell my parents, that we're doing that? I just brought up to my parents recently. Like, did you know that we would like go down this hill to get to McDonald's? Like, you would do what? Yeah, it's what we had to get there.
Get it. It reminds me of what most of my childhood was spent actually doing, and that was getting balls or pucks out of people's backyards. That was that was really most of my childhood, was where the ball went into or in the woods or on other people's properties all the time. I mean, a home run was when the ball goes into the neighbor's property. That's the home run, and you gotta get it. Yeah. Who was the the dude who we played home run derby with?
Yeah, his name is Vince Manzo, and so he was a year older, and we did later in life. We did have other kids move into the neighborhood around our age, and we changed from wiffle ball home run derby to playing basketball. And it was for basketball, it was me and Vince, and then two brothers moved in about 5 houses up, Tanner and Max Jones. They were really good basketball players. Tanner's a year older than me, and Max is a year younger. But we would just play 2-on-2 basketball, and we called it 4-man because we would just rotate the teams. And Tanner and Max were really good. Their dad played like internationally over in Europe for a time.
Damn.
And normally Tanner, whatever team he was on, he would win all the games. And it was always like a huge triumph if Vince, who was much shorter than the other three of us, if the two of us could beat Tanner and Max in 4-man, that was like, that was a good day. So that happened a few times, but it was rare.
I'm like picturing for some the backgrounds and the ethnicities of all these players involved. I'm like picturing, okay, you got some tall, athletic white dudes. Maybe one guy's like, you said Europe, so maybe we got a Serbian there. You got like a short Italian dude, and these guys are good
short Italian.
These
dude.
guys are good for their town, but if they have to expand, maybe when they play more talented players, perhaps from inner cities and beyond, then maybe the talent level is exposed. Do I have this right? Am I framing where we're at?
You got the Italian short kid right. I think I gave that one away. And I honestly don't even know the ethnicity of Tanner and Max. I would guess Eastern European.
Yeah.
Somewhat. But yeah, tall guys. And we also would play football too in the backyard, which we'd like, it was kind of awesome. Like you don't see this very often where you have like 3 or 4 backyards where you can first of all, where neighbors would just let kids run through their backyards. I feel like people are much more, strict about or putting fences up. It seems like today in neighborhoods, you see fences around everyone's yard. Everyone wants to keep their area fenced in. So I feel like we had a pretty nice setup where we could just run with like, it wasn't the length of a football field, but 40, 50 yards that we could play football and things like that. And at the end of it, we could have gone to the next yard too. There's no fence, but there was a German couple, older German couple that lived there called the Stankoffs. And if we went in their yard, he would come out and say something. But years later, I ended up taking over. My brother had a grass cutting business. And when he went to college, I took over when I was 12. And I eventually ended up cutting his grass. And he was a really nice guy. It was just like maybe it was a language barrier thing. And but he ended up being a great guy. So sorry for getting angry with you as a kid, Mr. Stankoff.
That's funny. I feel like I could relate to so much of that. Some of the neighbors seemed like scary. Like that's the word I would use in my head as a kid. The way they looked, and maybe one interaction, their face, maybe like a lot of adults looking back, as a kid, but thinking about the adults. I'm like, a lot of these people had like resting bitch face, resting angry neighbor face. I don't know. But when you get to talk to them or like some shit goes down and you have to interact with your neighbors, it's like, oh, these people are fine.
Yeah. No, dude, it's crazy because I think about like me today. I'm like 40 years old, younger than Mr. Stankoff was back then, but still, like I get that angry old man vibe going. If it's like 10 p.m. when I see some kids walking down the street, I'm like, what are these kids doing? Where are they going? I better turn my light on, make sure they don't come up and do something to my yard. It's like, what do I care? I don't know. It's weird how like your view on that stuff changes. Just I guess it's built into us like a protection thing, just making sure, no one's doing any harm to the property or potentially to my family.
Is it just that we care more or about we just care more about life as you get older? Is that a thing? I don't know, because I feel similar in a way too. Like, yeah, I could see those things. Like, well, yeah, getting suspicious of kids for no reason.
I think we just care more about things that kids just don't care about, like, which I think is probably a bad thing. Like when you look at it from a high level, I mean, it's better to care about less things. And I think, as these are things like, our house, our yard, whatever, our landscaping, our wife, our kids, whatever. I think we get to, you obviously want to protect that. You've invested money in it. You've, spent money to have a lawn guy come out or whatever. I cut my own grass, but a lot of people, have lawn and landscaping people. So I think it's just different priorities. And as we age, priorities change. And at that younger age, kids just don't care about that stuff, and probably would all be better off if we didn't care about that stuff and we didn't spend our money on that stuff. But that's America. It's the America we live in.
We're all just trying to improve ourselves and our space, I guess. It's just our property. No, it's part of it. Just that's what we shouldn't be consumed by that. That shouldn't be the number one goal of humanity is to have the perfect house, whatever that, and perfect living space. Like, because at some point, there's bigger things to worry about. What about middle school, high school? What kind of person were you becoming beyond? And I guess a pretty good athlete and whatnot, but what were you up to?
Yeah, I mean,
high school.
I was big into sports, middle school through high school. Played football starting in fifth grade. Started out as a tight end and eventually ended up playing defensive line. When I got to high school, I loved baseball growing up, but I stopped playing baseball in ninth grade, and I was a pretty good baseball player. I wish I would have stuck with that. I got cut from my ninth grade baseball team, and I was just so mad about it that I didn't go back the next year. And I always kind of regret not doing that, but just one of those things that happens in life, I guess. But
that's how I feel about playing, I think, trumpet and playing music. Like, I didn't like one of my teachers or something, my instructor, and I quit trumpet and whatever. And I wish I would have stuck with it. Baseball, I have a similar track too, but not going further as far as I would have liked to. That was more on me, I think, than I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it was on me. Maybe I was right to be cut, but I don't think I was. I think I was good enough to play with those other kids that were on the team. But anyway, yeah, it's different than anything I've seen today. Maybe it was more common back when I was in school, but our middle school was in the same building as the high school. So it was kind of weird. Like, you're in 7th and 8th grade and, just down the hall, you'll be walking past, kids that are, freshmen to senior year. So kind of a weird setup for that time. But our school was, I don't remember, at least like for me personally. Of course I had like, my core group of friends, that I play sports with and that I would hang out with on the weekends. But I was one of those guys that like, I would sit with like different people at lunch. Like, maybe for a couple of weeks, I'd sit with one group and then move to another group. I'd move around, and not like, I guess I wasn't somebody that was like really into cliques. I kind of hated cliques. Not that not that cliques didn't exist in our high school. They definitely did, but I tried to knock it into that. And, I tried to be a person that would like kind of bring people together. Like some of my closest friends would be like one of my closest friends growing up. His name's Bruno. And, he was actually he grew up and he went to Penn State at the same time as me and went to medical school. He was my doctor for a while, but not anymore. Probably shouldn't get into that, but he was one of my best friends growing up, and I had other friends on the football team. And Bruno did play football, but he was more friends with people outside of football. And I had friends that didn't play any sports and were kind of just into doing their own thing. I also had, in hindsight, looking back, I also had some friends that were some pretty bad influences on me at the time, and led me down some paths to get in trouble, and encouraged me to have a party at my house. My parents went out of town, which wasn't the best idea. Got a little bit out of control. Too many people showing up, but one of those things that you learn from. And at the time when that happens, it was so when this party happened, it was in my senior. Was my senior year? Yeah, it was my senior year. So I'm essentially an only child at that point in time. My sister had gone off to college. My brother had graduated college. So my parents were going down to visit my sister, and I decided to have this party at my house. One thing I did have is, I wanted to bring people together, but I also liked parties. I ended up joining a fraternity in college. That's probably why, but I liked hanging out with people. I liked drinking beer, and I don't know why I wanted to have like this big party at my house, but I did. And it got out of hand. Windows got broken, things that, carpets got ruined, things that could not be cleaned up by a high schooler happened. So my parents obviously ended up finding out, and that was a tough time for me, as I knew that I made a mistake and I knew I'd done something that I shouldn't have. And, I'd always had a good relationship with my parents and wanted to make them proud. And how I had most definitely let them down. That was something I did not feel good about. And, still when I do think back on it, I still don't feel good about it, even though it's a minor thing and a bump in the road. And my parents now just make fun of me for it. But yeah.
That is pretty funny because I can relate to pretty much all of that, and all of that happened to me basically. Almost to a T, the exact same thing, all the way to the older sibling, my sister being off to college and essentially being an only child up to that point. That is funny. But and I agree with all your sentiments and feel all your sentiments about like feeling bad and wanting to make your parents proud and having a good relationship up until that point. But thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I probably still should have done the party, but I needed to just be more organized about it.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, exactly. Needed to be more organized. I shouldn't have there was a group of kids that I let in.
Yeah, keep it out.
I wasn't even friends with them. Why'd I let them in? I should have said, no, you can't come in.
No, you're a nice guy. You're friendly.
Yeah. Nice guy. Trying to bring people together. I didn't want to turn anyone away.
Right. Even that is something I'm realizing more about myself as a whatever in my life. That's just who I am, that I like bringing people together, introducing people, just and the partying too, and the social aspect, just having that balance and having that being a part of your life. And even the lunch table stuff, like that's kind of how I was too, is just like going from table to table. And I think that might also just be, I'm curious. I'm like a curious person. I think that maybe I know you're the same way in that regard, just interested in and want to be, I want to be entertained also. I think that comes down to it. Who's funny, who's got some kind of stories. Those people, all those punks with not tattoos really then, but more like piercings and wearing all these bands that I never heard of. They're probably weirdos and might be interesting to talk to.
Yeah, like it's funny you say that to be entertained. And I remember there was one table I would go to that the kids sitting there, they would take turns like daring each other. they would make this drink out of iced tea and milk or whatever else, and whatever was on the lunch menu, and dare one of the kids to drink it. I wasn't about to do that, but I would watch other people do it, and it was entertaining. But
right, like fights in school. Like I'm not really trying to get involved really in fights. I may other than just like dumb shit, but like for the most part, like when people really get going at it, like that was more kind of entertaining, obviously.
yeah, I only got, well, in elementary school, we had this thing, and this goes back to, kids, we kind of got to do more what we wanted to back then, but I lived in a school district that didn't have buses. Everything was like pretty close together. So I walked to elementary school. Unless I was running late, then I get a ride from my mom. Same for high school, same for middle school. Would walk most of the time. And like, so after school, like kids aren't getting on buses, and like everyone gets on the bus and it's out of there. We were just milling around, hanging out on the playground. Or we it wasn't a fight club. It was just like, just like guys wrestling, just like, we weren't like punching each other in the face, but like roughhousing, and having some fun. We would do that after school. And the only like real fight I remember getting in was also during elementary school. Well, outside of college, I got in some fights, but I guess at that age, elementary school, there was a bully, and his name was Aaron Alon. I have no idea where he is now in life. And I actually was not friends with him, but like I said, like even at that age, elementary school, I was kind of friends with everybody. I kind of got along with everybody. Like he invited me to his birthday party before this happened. But I remember he was picking on someone, and I told him to stop, and he pushed me. He's like, "What are you going to do about it?" And I punched him right in the nose, and he, ran off, got the teacher. And I remember, or maybe I'm remembering my mom telling me this part of the story, who knows? But I remember the principal called my mom and said what happened. And my mom was a teacher, was a substitute teacher at that point in time. So she knew the principal, knew the teachers, knew a lot of the kids. And the principal told her, well, this is what happened. John got pushed and punched this other kid in the face. And he's like, well, I'm going to have to, give John this, detention after school, but I don't blame him for doing it. He actually did a good thing. So that would never happen in this day and age. But, and I guess
what aspect of that would never happen?
Where a principal telling a parent that it's okay that your son punched this kid in the face. I think rare that it would happen. You think it would?
It depends on the context. If I could create some situations where there's been some encouraging in society to punch people in the face. I would say that there is some of that going around.
Yeah, you're probably right. And I'm probably not. I mean, I'm so down on like the public schooling system. There's probably still some good principals out there who understand.
Yes, what you're commenting on, I think, is a principal's ability to, or a public school administrator's ability to support what's the right thing in a tricky situation.
Exactly.
That's what we're questioning, is their ability.
You clarified that perfectly. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think that principals have been handcuffed. Not to say I shouldn't have, had to go to detention or whatever, but to let a parent know, because I think it's good for parents to know like the context of the situation, like, in the context of what happened, your kid actually did something that was right by, defending himself or defending this other kid from getting bullied. So, but the funny part, the tail end of that is I ended up getting detention from that. And my punishment was I had to go around with the janitors and, get the trash cans and the recyclables cans and, help them to collect them from the classrooms or whatever. And that is when I learned that, at least at that school at that time, recycling was bullshit. Nothing was getting recycled because we took both trash cans and threw them in the garbage. And, I remember the janitor telling me, we don't recycle here. I'm like, well, why do we have recycling cans? He's like, well, I think we're going to start recycling eventually. I'm like, what? This is just a show? What? So I've never really fully believed in recycling as they sell it to us ever since that. I think a lot of it is just, politics and communities trying to say they recycle.
I think eventually if it's going to happen in terms of the recycling, it will get separated if there's any money in that pile of trash. Like it gets separated, like whether it's people out on my street outside there or whatever, or it's at some place. I can't even think of the word, right? The center or whatever.
Recycling center. Yeah.
Recycling center. Like I've been to a recycling center. They exist. I promise.
Yeah, I'm sure they exist. I don't know. Not to go down a rabbit hole, but
no, we're there.
It's pretty obvious. Like if you think about it a little bit, like the places that just say, "Oh, give us all your recycling, give us all your cardboard, your glass, your plastic, your whatever." There's no way all of that shit's getting recycled because the glass is breaking and it's getting in the cardboard and it's getting mixed in with the plastic, and it just doesn't. It's not economically feasible that they're going to put in the resources to separate that shit out and actually recycle it. So the places that are actually taking it, like segregated glass, cardboard, plastic, yeah, they could be recycling.
Well, in terms of like high school, junior, senior year, what were your plans, thoughts of your future? I know you went to Penn State, and we'll get into that, but what did you have thoughts of like career and things beyond teens?
Yeah, man. I was really into the weather, which is kind of weird, maybe. And it's also weird that my daughter, she's almost 8 years old, she's really into the weather. I don't know if it's like genetically passed down, but I remember when I was a kid, just watching the Weather Channel like a crazy person. Like watching the same segment multiple times, just very strange. And then, once we got computers and you could go on weather.com and actually do that stuff and look at radar. Back when I was in high school, like looking at radar, even that was it was hard to do because you're on dial-up and it just didn't really work that well. But you could see the radar if you're watching TV on the Weather Channel, that show you storms coming through or whatever. So I was always interested in that. So I decided that, I wanted to be a meteorologist. That was something that I wanted to be, and not necessarily that I even wanted to be on TV. Like that wasn't like the biggest part of it, but I wanted to study the weather. I was fascinated by it. So that was like one thing I was looking for in a college. And I mean, thinking back to high school, like I really did not apply myself at all for grades. I got good grades. Like I would get A's and B's, but I would take like honor classes and I would get a B. I would take an AP class, get a C. And I just didn't apply myself. I don't know how I got started doing it, but I would essentially just like study for tests. And I wouldn't study to like learn. I would just study to be able to, do okay on a test. I was always a good writer, always able to write. So like English and, classes like that, I could get by no problem. Or if I had to write a paper, I could always pump that out. But I always regret kind of like not really applying myself and studying and digging into different topics. But probably what it comes down to is just the way I was being taught. Like I was being taught in a way that public schools teach, where they're teaching memorization, and it's not critical thinking, and it's not doing a lot of things where you're allowed to go off on your own and try different things, which I think that's the best way I learn is, what I've really figured out the older I get is I do best with the less supervision, the better. The more I can tinker with things on my own, the better I do. But to get into college, so I applied to a bunch of schools. Penn State was the one that was at the time it was. I'm not sure if it's still the best meteorology school in the country. Applied to it, didn't get in, but I got in the School of Business. But I had to start in the summer session, which is fairly common. The way Penn State works, and probably a lot of state schools work, is you apply to like a main campus, which is, State College is the main campus for Penn State. And then if you don't get in there, they'll either send you to a branch campus or send you to a summer school. And actually, I got in at first. I got it. They tried to put me in a branch campus at Penn State Altoona. But my dad, I don't know how the heck. My dad has this skill with people. He's a lawyer, so he's able to kind of, I don't want to say manipulate people, but ask questions to figure out what he needs to do in order to get the intended result that he wants. So he ends up calling the advisors at Penn State, lays out what happened. My son got in Penn State Altoona, and I didn't check the box to do summer session. I don't know why. I'm an idiot. If I would have checked the box, I probably just would have got in immediately to summer session. But so that comes up, and it just so happens he's talking to the Penn State rugby coach, who's a academic advisor. And this guy's like, "Oh, your son played football. If he comes on the rugby team, then I'll get him in summer session." So I end up starting in the summer. I never showed up for the rugby team. I don't regret that. I kind of feel bad that I kind of stood the guy up and never showed up to a practice. But I ended up starting Penn State in the summer. And Penn State summer session it's awesome. At the time, I thought I would hate it. You kind of think this is my last summer with my friends, high school friends. I'm going to regret missing this. I've zero regrets, because it gives you this intro to college where it's a smaller amount of students. The classes then, I took a film study class where we watched movies and talked about them. I took an English class, which was super easy, just writing papers. And I took weightlifting. I had 7 credits, and the rest of it was just hanging out, getting to meet people, going to parties, and just adjusting to college life. So perfect intro to college. And it was actually during that summer session when me and my friend Jesse, who's still one of my best friends to this day, Jesse Anderson, when we were walking around looking for something to do. Probably shouldn't have been. We both had tests the next day. We should have been studying, going back to my lack of studying and lack of applying myself in school. And we were like, let's go walk around the fraternity houses. Let's go, see if there's a party. Walking around, and we see this guy in the front lawn of a fraternity house with a giant plastic golf club. And I think there were 2 of them hitting at this, just a wiffle ball back and forth. We're like, "Hey guys, what you doing?" And "Hey, you want to come in, drink some beer?" And long story short, that was my introduction to the fraternity. I ended up pledging Phi Kappa Tau, where I met Brian and Mark eventually. And, we can get into a little bit about that fraternity, but essentially it was a fraternity of guys, and we're just into hanging out and having parties. And yeah. I've kind of gone off on a tangent here.
No, that's good. No, I wanted to get the full up. I can relate to so much of that, even the stuff, because I had a similar experience with my dad. We visited Syracuse, and I got into what did I get into the school, but I didn't get into the film program, but there was a way I could transfer into it if I take this and this, and then this. So we just kind of sat down with a department and figured out the path. It's funny how. And he's in business and was in sales and that kind of stuff. So it's you got the lawyer and I got the sales, and that aspect of, combine that with the dadness that pushes us.
The dadness always helps. Yeah, but I realized I left the meteorology end. I didn't tie that off. So I didn't get into meteorology. I got in just general studies or whatever. And when I went up before starting to orientation, met with a counselor, and I don't know what the heck it was, but they look at these tests, math tests that you take in high school, some sort of placement test. And I guess I did really well on the math portion. I've always been just kind of naturally good at math. And this advisor's like, "Oh, wow, you're really smart. We're going to put you in chemistry and biology and calculus." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm smart. I can do all that shit." And I could not. So I was in all those, plus I was in the entry-level meteorology, plus I was pledging a fraternity, plus I was just enjoying, college and being on my own. And I did freaking horrible. My first semester, I don't even know. I ended up late dropping a lot of my classes, which you could do if at a certain point in time. If you were failing it, you could late drop it. But I ended up failing that meteorology class. So that was the end of my meteorology career, unfortunately.
Oh man, it wasn't. It was because mostly you didn't apply yourself. It wasn't so much that you were not interested in the content, or those kind of maybe were related.
I think a little bit of both. I was, yeah, I mean, and I shouldn't have been, but I was disappointed at the time in that, and it was probably different today, but they were teaching like the old style, like meteorology. Like we were like drawing, like having to draw like pressure maps and shit and like draw temperature maps in order to predict weather patterns. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I want to, this is computer based. I want to look at the computers and the different models and learn from them. But probably I needed that. I needed that basis, and I just didn't take it seriously and thought I could skate by, because that's what I'd done, all my life. Is I just kind of skated by in school and was able to do what I needed to. But with an onslaught of classes like that, I was in way over my head. So that's what happened there.
Did you eventually? Well, you said what was your eventual major? Did you?
Yeah, I ended up landing in the School of Business in Supply Chain and Information Systems, which essentially it's a very broad business degree. I also had they don't call it a minor, a focus in economics. But with supply chain, like it's everything from manufacturing to, assembly lines to, learning like warehouse management and all that shit. So yeah, I ended up getting my degree in that, which kind of opened the door for Penn State's really good at like placing people coming out of college and finding jobs. So I ended up getting a job with a company at the time. They were called Dietrich Industries. I think they've merged since then, but it was a management trainee program. And I thought I'd be working like, management trainee, I'll be working in management. No. They sent me down to Georgia, to southern Georgia. And this is in the summer, and I'm working in a warehouse, and they had me learn to do every single job in the plant, which was a little bit overkill. And honestly, I probably wouldn't have quit if I didn't have two other guys with me in the program. One of them was my roommate that I was living with, and we kind of leaned on each other throughout to get through it. But it was pretty brutal. And, thinking back in hindsight, like some of the shit they had me do, like driving forklifts, loading up trucks, where I'm taking like these, long pieces of steel that are like 40 feet long, putting them on my forks, loading them on a truck, having to go up over, the top of this truck to get to the bed, and just like crapping my pants, worrying about if I'm going to drop this and damage this tractor trailer. But yeah, that was my life for about a year out of college. And I'm like, why did I go to college? I'm freaking loading trucks. But then I got sent out to California, same program, and it was the opposite. I just happened to get there at a time that the guy who was working in the office doing all the purchasing, he had liver disease. He ended up passing away, but they just had me do his job. So I just got locked in his job, which was actually pretty cool. Got to talk on the phone all day, buying stuff and bullshitting with people. And that was actually a pretty fun job. But that ended up going away when the housing collapse happened. But not before getting to hang out with Brian and Mark plenty. I was in the Inland Empire. They were down in LA, and every weekend I would either go down to LA or I would go out to Palm Springs. I had a buddy from high school that lived down in Palm Springs. So I spent almost no time, or as little as possible, in Riverside. But yeah, those were fun times, but I had zero money. I spent all of my money on traveling around and just having a good time. But so when the housing market collapsed, I looked around at things. I'm like, I'm going to get out of here. And I'll never forget, before I left, I went down to LA one more time, hanging out with Mark and Brian. And and for those listeners out there, Mark and Brian we founded
Brian McWilliams. Yeah.
Yeah. Mark-Claire Brian McWilliams, who founded Lions of Liberty together years later. We're hanging out and they wanted me to, just move down to Los Angeles and live there. And Brian, classic Brian McWilliams, got so mad at me that he refused to say goodbye and just walked off down the street.
That you were moving?
Man. Yeah, because I was moving back to Pittsburgh and I wasn't moving to LA.
Was this when you told him that you were moving back, or when you were actually moving?
This is when I told him that I was going to be moving back to Pittsburgh. He got so angry with me, but I still bring it up with him. Just a hilarious moment in hindsight.
Because we know what that anger really means. It's not really anger.
Yeah.
It's something else. He would miss you and loves you and all that stuff, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was hard.
I'm sure. But but in the grand scheme of things, speaking of love, there was a reason why I was going back to Pittsburgh, because eventually I ended up meeting my wife. We both went to Penn State, graduated the same year, 2006. To our knowledge, we do not remember meeting each other while at Penn State. I mean, we could have at a bar bumped into each other, but probably it was good that we didn't meet, because she probably wouldn't have liked me when I was in college. But we met at the arts festival. I was there meeting up with friends to go to bars and get drunk. She was there to do some of that, but also to look at art. I was not looking at any art, but met her in a basement bar. Just approached her group of friends, started talking to them, and the rest is history. Yeah, so that's how I met my wife, in a bar. I feel like people don't meet in bars anymore, but
no,
back in the day, that used to be like the place to meet.
Yeah, but you also had a big part of the shared history and all that with the Penn State. So I'm sure that was a lot of the conversation that evening. You said it was a Penn State event, or was just it was like art gallery something? Was it related to Penn State?
So Penn State every year, we actually just went to it this past weekend. We've gone back since we met. We've gone back to this was our 15th one. I think they do this in a lot of college towns in the summer, where they'll shut down some of the streets and they bring in, vendors come in with their, selling pottery and paintings and wooden spoons and all that stuff. Then there's live music, all that good stuff, food trucks, and people come in from all around and hang out. And we do that now. And we bring our daughter with us now, and she loves it. They have, water buckets in the street where the kids can, run underneath them and cool off on a hot day. But when I was there, when I met my wife, I didn't know any of that stuff even existed. I was just there to go to the bar and have a good time. But you bring up having things in common, and that's exactly, what we went to. She grew up outside of Pittsburgh, to farther out in the country than me, in 84 PA. I grew up in Mount Lebanon, and it's immediately talking about that. She wasn't back in Pittsburgh yet. She was living in Morgantown, which is where WVU is, and she was managing a Red Lobster. So for the first several months, we had a little bit of a long distance relationship when I was living in Pittsburgh and she was in West Virginia. But she ended up moving up to a more local restaurant to be closer, and things went from there. So 3 years of dating, which I think is a good amount of dating before proposing. Some people think you should propose faster, but proposed after 3 years. And we got married after 5 years of knowing each other. So we were engaged for about 2 years, and we've been married for 10 years. And we have a almost 8-year-old daughter now, which is ridiculous how fast the time goes by. Like, completely, like, to go back to at the beginning, talking about, being an old man, saying old man things. Yeah, time goes faster when you get old. Like, that's a real thing for sure. Time goes faster. And I don't know if it's like, if I can scientifically prove it, but I've talked about with my buddy Howie Snowden, who used to come on Lions of Liberty all the time, that time is like not real. It's kind of just like this. It's hard to explain, but I think time can like morph back and forth. Yeah. Some moments can seem longer than others for sure.
But you're saying, since time is not real, in a sense, maybe they are. I don't know. Yeah, no, I do get what you're saying. What you're saying though, but congratulations on all of that. Like the family and the daughter and all that. Like and it's you're living in a good life for sure. It sounds like.
Yeah, and it's I mean, it's something that I always wanted. I've always wanted to have a family. My brother and sister, they both have 4 kids each. My brother had twins. His first 2 were twins, and 2 younger ones. And then my sister had kids. So she's uh, her and her husband made me an uncle. They were the first ones to have kids. That's when I was still in college. So seeing my sister raising a family, and getting to be around kids when I was still pretty young, and being a pretty young uncle, I got to see that life. And that was one of the things that we're being able to be close to that, because when I moved down to Georgia for that first job, my sister also lived in Georgia because she went to Auburn in the South. She was living north of Georgia. I was south. So every other weekend I would shuttle up there and get to hang out with my niece when she was a little baby. This was almost exactly 17 years ago. But yeah, I saw that was something I wanted. And that was something that, kind of was a transition point for me in life, where I was like going from the partying, seeing, oh, you know what, there's actually more to life than this partying. There is having a family. This is actually pretty cool, having a family, seeing it from the outside like that. So it became something that I wanted. And, my wife and I would like to have more kids, but, not to get into the details of it, but it's one of those things where, Ruby, my daughter, she was an emergency C-section. I'm not even sure if that's a contributing factor or not, but we haven't been able to have a second baby. But it's really just made me grateful for being able to have one kid, because there are so many. And I didn't really think about this a lot before until it's happened in my own life. But once your eyes kind of open to it, you start to see all of the other couples out there. And that's not to say that, there's a lot of couples out there that they just don't want to have kids, and that's fine. But there are married couples, there are, couples that, wish they could have a kid, but can't. And my heart breaks for those situations.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing all that. For sure. I appreciate that. Means a lot to me for sure. Yeah, we can get into more like what you're working on these days, and professional stuff, and Lions of Liberty, and you could tell me about those things, kind of catch me up to the present a little bit.
Yeah, I won't talk about my day job just because I don't want to bring that into this into this sphere. But I work
You're,
in
you're a spy.
No, I work in risk management. But if I was going to talk about my job, I'm not a spy. I would have, but I would have to, go to my company and say, I'm going to go on a podcast and talk about this. And I work in the nuclear power industry, so can't get into the details of it, but I'm a big supporter of nuclear power, and I think it's a good thing. But when it comes to other projects, so Lions of Liberty, obviously talked about that earlier, founded that with Mark and Brian. Now it's just Brian and I, because Mark deserted us and started his own thing. Just kidding. It was just, it's people. I honestly don't think people believe us when we say, but it was like when Mark came and told Brian and I that he wanted to go off and do his own thing. We're like, we know you do. Like, we were just waiting for you to tell us. Like, not sure why you waited so long. You could,
Yeah, it wasn't a surprise.
Were you surprised by it?
Was I surprised? I mean, no. Why? I mean, it's that's always a possibility with any band that I listen to, or any if people watch TV shows, this can end.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep a group thing together because people want to do their own things, and it's understandable and happens organically. So I guess not. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, it happens organically, and that's exactly what happened. But yeah, so we still have Lions of Liberty. My show is called Finding Freedom. Brian's is called Mean Age Daydream. Mine is on Monday. His is on Wednesday, if I could speak. And I used to, as you know, my show used to be Felony Friday, where it was heavy in the criminal justice system, which honestly just kind of got tough to talk about every single week. And when COVID was happening, I just wanted to talk about other things. I wanted to talk to people navigating COVID. I want to talk to entrepreneurs. I wanted to talk to creative people. I just wanted to talk to different people. Nothing against individuals that have been through the criminal justice system, been incarcerated, many, incarcerated for nonviolent crimes who never should have done any time in prison. And mostly everyone I interviewed has an incredible story that most people, I think, are walking around in this world not understanding the powerful stories that people who go through incarceration and the people, in their circle, their family and friends, what they have to go through. And one of the reasons I started that podcast was because of something personal that happened. Someone very close to my wife and I, who ended up going to not to federal prison, but state prison for selling marijuana while he was in college, which is totally absurd. Sold to an undercover agent multiple times and they came back for enough buys and enough quantity to get to the point where they could charge him with multiple felonies, which is insane. So I got to see from the outside that happened, how crazy it was. I also got to see the reaction of people around him who were like, well, judging him for it, which my perspective was like, this is insane. We should all be saying this is insane. Why is this happening? But getting to see that, but then also seeing the support coming around him. And without that support from family and friends, he would have been probably stuck up in the cycle of recidivism. So yeah, that's one of the things that inspired me to start Felony Friday. And, I'm thankful that I did that for all those years. But to answer the rest of your question, like what else am I doing? I do land investing, which people hear that like, what the heck is land investing? Essentially, you buy land as cheap as you can. So you find people who either want to sell their land. Maybe they have taxes they owe on it. They don't use it. Maybe they got it willed to them, and it's become a burden. And you buy it for, less than market value, hopefully significantly less than market value, because you're helping them out. They're not having to market it. They don't know how to sell it. You're taking it off their plate. Maybe they need the cash real fast and it can take a lot of time to sell land. So maybe they need cash real fast and they don't have the time to wait a year to really market a piece of land to get the market value. So you do that, or you can buy it at an auction and then you turn around and sell it, market it, take good pictures, good videos, and sell it. The way to get the maximum value is to sell it on terms and seller finance it. So I wish I did more of that. I just don't have enough time. Honestly, if I just could dedicate all my time to that, I could do that full time, no problem, and make enough money. And maybe, hopefully someday I will just do that. But other than that, I'm into health and wellness. My wife and I have a home-based direct sales health company that we're affiliated with, and make money that way. So I'm into side hustles. I'm into diversifying income. I think it's a smart thing to do. Not only for like, obviously the financial side of it, that's an obvious thing. You want to have diversified income, but I think it's good to, develop skills and just to make life exciting, to be talking to different people. And, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I feel like when I talk to a lot of people, I'm excited about all these different things I'm doing. People are like, how are you doing that? Like, that sounds so tiresome. Like, I don't know. I feel like it gives me energy.
Yeah. Again, I keep coming back to the same things over and over again, just things I can relate to from having all the side hustles. Perhaps yours are becoming more, I'm certain you're doing a better job of monetizing your side hustles than I am. But nevertheless, I have the same feelings about, sometimes people have, well, you're doing all this and that. And like, I don't know, it is kind of energizing, and you don't think of it as a burden when you're doing things that you're you're passionate about it. And I also enjoy, especially the thing with this podcast, I do have it enables me to talk to people from all walks of life. And that's something that I like appreciate and don't want to like limit myself too much. And that's like what you can get with, I think, with Finding Freedom. You have that ability, like you're saying with this one, to talk to anyone you want to. And then you describe all different types of people that you like talking to. And that I think has included, like, I don't know specifically felons, but people who have said that more of that in their background. Like you still have that opportunity to still talk to those types of people on Finding Freedom. So you're not limited at all in that regard. Where can people find you, follow you, anything else? Oh, you know what I want to ask you before we get into the plug stuff? I always ask everyone this, to try to remember to ghosts, aliens, any experiences with either. Do we believe in them? UFOs? Same question.
That's a whole podcast on its own. So do I believe in ghosts? I believe I'm coming from a Christian background, and I believe that there are other spirits. So if you want to call that ghosts, sure. I think we live in a spiritual world, and there's forces, acting and influencing people, and that could materialize as ghosts, that can materialize as aliens. I'm not, I really don't think that we necessarily have aliens visiting us from, freaking millions of miles away on other planets. It just doesn't add up to me that would really be the case with how, these so-called sightings and all the different things are playing out. I'm not sure why they would just be hanging out, coming from millions of miles away and just, showing up on the radar and then disappearing. I think we would know they were here if they were coming, from another solar system, and they probably already would have taken us over by now, or maybe they already have taken us over. So I don't know.
Yeah. So it sounds like you believe, but you don't have any personal experience with in that regard, in either one.
No personal experience. I mean, I've heard some freaking creepy stories that I feel like I was there. Like there was this one story that, funny enough, one of the leaders at my church growing up would talk about. I went to a Presbyterian church, a really old church, like one of those like big, beautiful buildings with, a huge, what are those things called? A huge organ in the front. And he tells a story of being in the church by himself late at night and hearing the organ playing and thinking he's going to go see someone playing the organ. I'm getting like chills just talking about this, seeing someone playing the organ. And he walks in and sees a ghost, a little girl there playing the organ. I'm like, I'm getting chills just talking about that. But
I got the same thing to having, like, when people tell me some stories that are just like very vivid like that on this podcast. And I don't know, I believe them more than I ever maybe have or would in the past, just from not any like you're an idiot for believing in ghosts, just like just I was more skeptical, or I'm just more open now. I don't know what it is, but who the hell knows what's going on in this? And I'm open to whatever. I respect ghosts. I respect aliens. Don't fuck with me. We good. Anyway, where can people follow you? You can give all the plugs for all the things.
Yeah. Whatever podcasting app you're listening to this podcast on, you can go to that same app and type in Finding Freedom, and my podcast will come up, just Finding Freedom. Or if you want the whole Lions of Liberty Network feed, type in Lions of Liberty and it'll pop up. We also do a show, which I'm really enjoying doing on Fridays. We do it almost every Friday. It's called Meme Wars. And it's just Brian and I talking little current events, but also just bringing up a meme, bringing up a video, something that happened in the past week. A lot of Joe Biden stuff, just laughing at stuff he's talking about. It just kind of trying to key down. So, on my show, sometimes it gets serious. Brian's show, his is more comedy, more levity, but he does get in some serious topics, political topics. but we try to approach our Friday Meme Wars show as just, a nice little, bite of comedy and, relaxation and laughter to set you into your weekend. So we've gotten a good reaction to that. So
I'm a
check.
fan. Yeah,
Yeah. You like it?
yeah, and
Nice.
I've been catching a bunch of them lately. I just you guys obviously have good chemistry and a dynamic, and it's just like, and I'm sure you do this for each other too. But it's like sometimes it's hard to like even Biden acting silly or senile,
Mm-hmm.
doing some funny stuff. It is kind of like on a deeper level, sad, depressing, and black pilling to some degree, knowing that this could be the person, in front of the country. So to be able to digest
Yeah.
these sad, overall depressing things through with each other, I think it's helpful. That's why I like to watch people recapping. That's why I like listening to you guys, is just so I get that filter of like someone telling me how everyone is stupid in politics and corporate media, and I don't have to go directly to the source. I get that filter of you guys who make fun of it.
Yeah. Appreciate that, man. I guess the only other plug would be follow me on Twitter at John Odermatt. I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter. I
I think everyone
like
does.
I love to argue with people. The thing is, like with Twitter, I get all my news from there, essentially. Like that's where I get my news from. So I'm never going to stop going on Twitter. But so follow me there. I'm on Facebook and Instagram too, but I don't know. I don't do as much there. I think Facebook's about to die. It feels like everyone's half-assing it on Facebook nowadays.
I only use Facebook for some private groups and for just as
Yeah.
like a messaging app, basically at this point, or occasionally posting something just because I feel like obligated to myself to also post it on Facebook, kind of
Are
thing.
you on the new Zuckerberg Threads app?
No, should I be? I mean,
I mean, I like it. I like the way it's set up. It's very simplistic right now, and there's no ads. Of course, that's going to change. There's a couple of things I don't like about it. It's similar to Twitter, but it's also more similar to like early Facebook, I think. And what I like about it is it's really easy to like the feed right now brings in a lot of people that you don't normally see, which is good and bad. But the people you don't like, you can just hide them or block them. But you get to like see people that maybe you've never interacted with them before, so you get to comment on their status, maybe make a connection. So it's good for that. But like the downside is there's censorship and all of that standard meta stuff. But that comes with the territory there.
What about Vince, the dude who you played home run derby with? Where's he today?
Where Vince? He's working for the government. I haven't seen him in years. My mom and his mom are still really close. She still lives in the same house that they grew up in, but I haven't seen him in years. I used to be like, it's weird. One thing with COVID, and Vince doesn't fall in this category, but I used to like stay in pretty good touch with my friends from high school, like my core group of friends, even some of them from the different groups like I talked about before. But with COVID, it was just this weird dynamic where people got on these different sides. And now I feel like I only see like two of my friends from high school. And I don't know if I'll ever get back together with my other friends. Kind of sad.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things.
Well, if sometimes it's the ebb and flow of life, and you lose touch with people for different reasons, and then you make new friends. Essentially, so you don't.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like there's a void for friendship, love, family, any of those things in your life.
No,
regardless.
and that is a cool thing with having a kid is you are exposed to a whole new group of people when you're coaching teams and when you're going to your kid's school and all that stuff. And like it surprised me how much I coached my daughter's softball team this year. It was one of the best times of my life because like at this age, 7, 8, I guess there was 8 and under. So every girl was under 8 years old. They're just at an age where they're just like so open to like learning and they're sponges, and they actually, if you tell them like how to do something, they actually, change and do it right. They don't have the skill yet, but they'll try. And it was a really cool experience. And I didn't have any like bad experiences with parents yelling at me or anything like that. I got a lot of help from assistant coaches, which I hear from other people who, coach their kids' teams, that normally there's a lot of problems with that, with getting other parents to volunteer, but I had no issue with that. So I guess I had like a unicorn type experience. Hopefully it continues to happen.
Good stuff. That's good to hear. Glad to hear. Good stuff all around. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. It's been fun. I learned a lot about you. We have lived similar, different in a lot of ways, but also similar in a lot of ways as well. And that's always fun to talk to people about those things, where what's different, what can we relate to, and all that stuff. So thanks again, and let's talk soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Peace. So there you have it. Episode 143 with John Odermatt. That was a lot of fun. It's always fun to see how many random things I have in common with the people I talk to. Some really specific things too. I really appreciate John's time for sure. Anyway, for everything about this show, of course, head to peoplewelovepodcast.com. That's at peoplewelovepodcast on Instagram. I'm at Adam Choid on Instagram and Twitter. AdamChoit.com for all my personal stuff, my podcast, my short film, comedy show tickets if they're available. But I think that's about all I got for today. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you as always. And let's talk soon. Peace.